Network for March, leveraging the power of branding and communications for employee volunteer programs. We are going to wait a few more minutes and let other attendees sign in. So if you're on the call, please hang in there and we'll get started in a few minutes.
Wait a minute, am I tweeting right now?
Julie, can you move?
Yes.
While we wait for the rest of the attendees?
Yep, we'll do it. Yeah.
Welcome everyone to our Best Practice Network of March. We are here with Howard Breindel and Seth Margolis from DeSantis Breindel. They are a branding firm out in New York City, and I'm very excited to have them join us to talk about leveraging the power of branding and communications for employee volunteer programs. So as more attendees are getting on the call, I want to make sure everyone can see our screen as well as hear my voice. So attendees, if you could type into your question box, that will let me know that you can hear me. Great. It looks like we can hear everyone. Wonderful. So Julie, if you could move the slide to the next one, we'll just go through a few logistic things before we get started. So for those of you on the call and who've already tried typing in questions, that's how we'll collect questions during the presentation. So if you think of something to ask Howard or Seth as they're speaking, type it in and we will get back to you and have a Q&A session at the very end. Also, if you are a Twitter follower, you can follow the VolunteerMatch Twitter account, VM_solutions, and the hashtag BPN_branding. To follow the conversation. If you have to leave early or you want to give some feedback, definitely join us on Twitter. So without further ado, I would like to pass over the presentation to DeSantis Breindel.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Howard Breindel, and we're delighted to be speaking with everyone today, and we really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their busy days to join us. We're going to be speaking about leveraging the power of branding and communications for employee volunteer programs. Specifically, we'd like to tell you a little bit about us very briefly, and then go through 7 key principles that we've outlined. And of course, as mentioned, we'd be delighted to take questions at the end of the program. Just very briefly about us, we are a corporate branding and marketing communications firm based in New York City. We focus on working with companies that are going through key inflection points, and we have extensive experience working with CSR communications overall, and as many will attest, employee volunteer programs and employee volunteerism as a whole is an increasingly growing part of CSR programs. My partner and I have been together for more than 20 years. We were formerly part of the Gray Global Group family of companies. We have 25 employees, and we've received many industry recognitions for our work, both in corporate branding as well as CSR branding. Our clients span a wide range of industries, from mid-sized companies to Fortune 1000 and Fortune 100 companies as well. As you can see, the list is rather diverse, and this is a partial list. Many of these companies we've done corporate branding, and for many we've done CSR branding, some of which you're going to see in our presentation today. But before we begin, we also want to talk a little bit about, branding in and of itself. And I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Seth, who's going to jump in, and we're going to share the microphone throughout the presentation today.
Great, thank you, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. So, branding is one of those fields that everybody has a different definition of. And depending on whether we're talking to people in the branding field or people outside the branding field, everyone has a different perspective on what it really means. But to some extent, we are all involved in the branding field because we're all trying to communicate what we're offering to other people, what's the value we deliver. We feel strongly that a lot of people think that a brand is kind of what you say. So it's whatever you put in your advertising or a poster in a lobby. That's your brand. We take a different approach, which is that branding is what your most important audiences think of you. It's how they respond to you, and it's the value you offer them in their minds. So it's a relatively simple definition of branding, again, based on what people think of you, not what you tell other people. So when you look at a volunteerism brand, the circles surrounding the center are all of the different audiences that a corporate volunteerism brand has to address. Clearly, the most important, or certainly one of the two most important, are your employees, because to the extent that you brand to them, they will be a key audience, but also the community partners that you work with, an important constituent. And I would even say that these others are equally important, or not equally important, but very important to your volunteerism brand. On the lower left-hand side, you see recruits. So, to the extent that they understand that you have a commitment to volunteerism and to corporate social responsibility in general, that can help your company to recruit the best and brightest. And obviously, when customers understand the extent of the work you do, even if it's just seeing your employees wearing a T-shirt as they're volunteering during an impact day or over the course of a year, that can support your volunteerism brand as well. So if a brand is what they think, how do you influence what they think? And you do that in a lot of different ways. For a volunteerism brand, you have a lot of different sort of communications tools that you can use to influence how your most important audiences feel. So there's email marketing. There's environmental branding, which is sort of a highfalutin word for posters and other ways that you impose or you put your brand into the workspace that your employees are in. You can video, intranet, internet. This webinar is an example of a channel that you can use to express your brand. And I think, one of the things that I would say here, and we're going to talk a little about this, is that, we're talking about a employee volunteerism brand. In many senses, that supports your overall corporation's brand as well, and vice versa. In fact, we wrote a white paper that we can make available to you at the end on sort of the halo effect of how your CSR and volunteerism activities can actually burnish and kind of reflect positively in your corporate brand. So that is our just so that everyone understands kind of where we're coming from in terms of what we think of as a brand. So why brand an employee volunteerism program? And I think, there are really 5 overarching reasons. And clearly the most important is to increase participation. I think for a lot of you, that's your most important goal. That's how you're evaluated. And it's really what we all want to do with employee volunteerism program. But it also unifies a lot of activities. So some organizations, including a number that we work with, have organized volunteer activities, a single day, a single event, or a period of time in which employees volunteer en masse. But a lot of them also have, and through VolunteerMatch, in many cases, ways that you can sign up individually. And when you have an employee volunteerism brand, it kind of unifies all that activity. So that whether you're doing it individually or as a group, you have a sense of participating in something larger. And that builds a sense of community, which is really important and where I think a brand can really help. And ultimately, that supports a strong corporate culture, because whether you're, again, a one-off volunteering at a library or working en masse with a corporate program, you're part of the corporate culture because you're sort of under this brand umbrella. And ultimately, I guess our overarching goal is to maximize the impact. So it's maximize the impact of the good work that you're doing and the impact of the volunteerism in supporting your company, the sense of community that your employees have, your corporate brand. So I think that's why it's important, that we see it's important to build an employee volunteerism brand over time. how you do that is really what we're here today to talk about. And we've kind of narrowed it down to what we're calling 7 success principles for developing a brand. And a lot of these apply to CSR in general as well as to corporate volunteerism. So the first one is really key. It's the starting point. You need to find the relationship between what your company does and what your volunteer and CSR activities stand for. Now, it doesn't have to be a direct one-on-one relationship. So, for instance, a client of ours, Goldman Sachs, we're going to show you some examples of the work we do for them. Their kind of signature volunteerism program is called Community Teamwork. Well, the notion of teamwork is extremely important to the Goldman Sachs culture. In fact, it's a very competitive, achievement-focused organization, so they're always trying to instill teamwork into their culture, and they use their employee volunteerism program to do that. So it doesn't have to be a direct correlation to what you do, but it does have to support the overall corporate brand. So a good example of how this can be is Campbell Soup. So their volunteerism, actually their CSR in general and their volunteerism is about nourishing. It's about nourishing communities. You can see it's nourishing our consumers, neighbors, employees, and our planet. So it's a wonderfully clever tie to their product and their brand. But what's interesting is if you look at what Campbell's actually does in terms of corporate volunteerism, employee volunteerism, it's not just about soup kitchens and nutrition in schools, which would be instead of a direct correlation. They do all sorts of educational, home building, the complete range of volunteer activities, but all under that nourishing brand, which kind of serves to unite them so that everyone feels a sense of connection to each other and then to the corporate culture. And as an aside, the quote we pulled out from the president and CEO of Campbell's, our customers, consumers, and other stakeholders should know what we stand for when it comes to CSR and sustainability. So it's a rare instance of where the CEO puts a stake in the ground and says we want people to know about what we're doing, and it's clearly a part of our brand. Another good example of relating the volunteerism brand to the corporate brand is Disney's Volunteers. Also a very clever brand. And again, it's not that everything that Disney volunteers do has directly to do with children, although much of it does. You can see they do the New York Restoration Project. There's a number, Meals on Wheels for seniors. It couldn't be farther removed from kids. It's just that by branding it with the Disney brand, they create a sense of community and a wholeness in the brand so that even if one person is doing one thing, he or she feels a part of the whole corporate volunteer effort at Disney. It's a very good example. The second principle is also important. You know, you need to find out why people get involved in volunteer activities. You know, sometimes it's personal, it's to honor a colleague or a loved one. Sometimes it's to grow professionally by learning a new skill. There are any number of reasons, but you know, and it actually can vary by year. It can vary by your organization, by activity, by geography even. But you know, it's true with any aspect of branding or communications. Information is the key, and you really need to do the research here to find out what motivates your employees and to do the volunteering that you're asking them to do, and then to direct messaging to that motivation. That's key to all branding, including in the volunteerism area. So a while back, we worked with CIBC World Markets, which is a global investment banking firm, on this really interesting volunteerism program they have called Miracle Day. So one day each year, their employees are encouraged to donate the proceeds of all their trades to children's charities. And for that to happen, you have to get these sort of hard-nosed traders to pick up the phone in their free time, call their clients, and urge their clients to trade with them on that day. It's a very interesting model, but what we found when we got involved in them through qualitative research was that these traders, the program had been around for a while and it had gotten sort of tired and stale, as these programs can happen. And what we found was that participation had trailed off because employees didn't feel really connected to the charities that ultimately their efforts were supporting. They really didn't get the connection between volunteering to donate their time and their trading revenue to the beneficiaries, which were children. So there was a sort of staleness took over and a lack of connection. So when we created the brand for that year and the campaign, it was all about the beneficiaries in this case. And you can see the picture here. That's a wonderful program that they support called Ice Hockey in Harlem for children's ice hockey. And we highlighted stories and posters on the internet and a film. We're going to show some of this to you later, all of which forged a connection directly between the employees on the trading floor primarily and the children who, before this, they may have had no connection with. They never met them. All they knew is that somewhere a check was being written to these kids because of the time that they volunteered for Miracle Day. So I think we succeeded in getting hard-nosed traders to understand that their efforts had a direct connection to the kids.
One of the nice things about this program was that, as Seth has mentioned, things did drop off a little bit in prior years. And after this branding program and engaging people with the messaging and the theme that we learned was important to them, there was a 50% increase, or more, greater than, almost a 60% increase in participation that year that yielded $8 million in additional commissions that were donated to children's charities on this one given day. So it was really about doing the research, understanding what was going to be a decision driver, and then communicating through a brand to achieve that. And we were really pleased with the results as they were as well.
Yeah, and you can, there's so many different ways that you can find out what motivates. Often with corporations, you can do informal focus groups to determine what motivates them. You can do online surveys. There are a number of ways that you can find out why people volunteer, why people choose to get involved. And actually, this is a good case in point with Goldman Sachs. So I mentioned before, Community Teamwork is their signature culture-building activity. It's a wonderful program where employees in, I forget, 20 or 30 cities around the world donate a day of service to community groups. And what we found when we conducted informal research with the firm was that, yes, people were very eager to do good in the world, to feel that they were making a contribution, but the reality was it was one day of activity, and people felt a certain sense that how much can you really do in a day. But what really got people excited was the chance or the opportunity to kind of do something else. So a banker, an investment banker, could become a coach to children for a day, or an accountant could be a landscaper working at an urban park. A marketing professional could entertain residents at a senior center. It was the chance to kind of step out, to do something that you're not used to doing. And that was really the motivator that we found for the people who participated in community teamwork. So our campaign, we built the brand and then the campaign for last year around this theme that you're seeing now. What do you want to be? Visit CCW to find out. So if you look at the post, these are examples of some posters, and we did a sort of a multimedia campaign. We'll show you some other examples later. But we said, be a painter, and we showed pictures of Goldman Sachs people painting. I think this is a school building here in New York. Be a coach. That was, I believe, in Japan. Be a role model. These are kids, employees mentoring small children. Be a gardener. So it really appealed. It wasn't so much a direct appeal to change the world, make an old person feel younger or make a child feel wanted. It was really about, you can do something different. You can step out of your usual role in life. It was very successful and resulted in a nice bump in participation that year. So find out what really motivates your people to join. I think you'll be surprised in every case, because we always have been, by what really causes people to want to get involved. It's not always as obvious as you think, and that's true of any research we've done in any area of branding, by the way. Principle 3, it's often said a picture is worth 1,000 words, and it's obvious, but I think it bears emphasizing. You really need to show employees what the experience of volunteering is like if you want them to participate. Another thing that we found in our work in this area and in talking to employees is that it may not be obvious to us, but a lot of people feel a certain anxiety or even fear about volunteering. It might involve visiting a new neighborhood, working with unfamiliar people, doing something that they're not used to doing in their regular job or home life. And showing pictures of them is very motivating, it's very reassuring. It's absolutely vital, I think, for building a brand around employee volunteerism. That said, please don't use stock photography. I think your colleagues, as you probably know, can sniff this out, a phony picture from a mile away. This is from an unnamed, I think it was a Fortune 1000 company, their employee volunteerism website, and it's a wonderful picture. It's, it might have won a Pulitzer Prize at some point, but it's clearly a stock photograph. It's not. It doesn't reassure in any way. It's just not them. It's not the employees. Your employees need to be able to put themselves in the picture, almost literally. So here, for example, is a real photograph. It's from Goldman Sachs Community Teamwork. I believe it was in Bangalore. And you can see in the background on the right, that's the T-shirt from that year. But I think what makes it kind of real is not just that they can see the T-shirt. It's just a real picture. It has warmth. You can see being there. You can see that employee, the Goldman Sachs employee, is having fun. And then the people around him are having fun. They seem to be welcoming him there. So, this clearly feels like a real photograph. Look at the photograph at the top here of GE. I mean, it just, it's not going to win a Pulitzer Prize for photography maybe, but it definitely allows GE employees to see what it would be like. I think this is working at some sort of food distribution center. It's real, it's authentic, it's what employees really want to see, and it's what they need to see. Here's one from Safeway's volunteer site. They're a VolunteerMatch participant. In fact, I know that the banner was actually designed by VolunteerMatch. So congratulations there. And in 2010, they launched this a kickoff event, a volunteer fair at their headquarters in California. It's called, their employee volunteer program is called Safeway Cares. Employees are encouraged to volunteer with family and coworkers. It focuses on cancer research, education, diabetes. But again, if you look at this, there's a sense of authenticity. If you look at these photos, I hope you can see them clearly. Again, I don't know that they're going to win prizes, but they sure look real, and it looks like a Safeway employee could put themselves in this picture and feel, oh, I can see myself doing that. That doesn't look frightening. In fact, it looks like fun. So I think this is a really successful use of actual photography. So again, avoid stock at all costs and let employees put themselves in the picture. Principle 4, another obvious one that can certainly stand repeating. If you're going to use actual photos of actual employees, you're going to have to do a lot of planning. It's just inescapable because, in fact, you're going to be using, typically, you're going to have to use current or even current activities to create next year's campaign. It's one of the biggest logistical challenges that we face in working in CSR, and particularly in the volunteerism programs. When you build a brand around your employees and what they do, it's not the same as building a brand around a product which doesn't change over time, which you have absolute control over. You're building a brand around people and their activities. It requires a lot of planning to execute properly. One of the for one of our employee volunteer programs, we in fact send photographers in the field on 4 continents over the course of about 4 months to shoot videos and stills of employees that work in the community. It's an enormous undertaking. It's not called a campaign for nothing. And then we use the video footage and these stills in the subsequent year's campaign. So, and a good side benefit which we're showing here, this is for one of our CSR volunteerism clients, is that you build a remarkable library of images. It's an incredibly valuable asset to have, both for all sorts of purposes, including all CSR activities, volunteerism activities, even the corporate annual report. And we actually have worked with a number of clients to work with Getty Images and other photography libraries to help them organize a database so that they can tag different photographs by type of image, type of employee, type of event. It becomes a fantastic asset. It's a real side benefit of this sort of advanced planning that we're talking about. Another way to do that is to learn from past successes. So we generally encourage our clients to follow up any volunteerism event or even a season of events with some sort of survey. You can do them, you can use SurveyMonkey or any online survey. You can use your intranet to do it. It can be as informal as an email. But find out what went right, what went wrong, if they're planning on re-upping for the following year, because that can inform your planning for the next year and really make it a success. As I said, planning is really a mind-boggling planning sheet that we prepared for one client. I mean, it involves photo shoots in a dozen cities, video producing, print production. Again, they don't call this a campaign for nothing, but if you do it in advance, it really can be much less daunting. And not all of your volunteerism efforts, I assume, are going to be this complex, but in this case, it was for us.
And we look at these programs and we think of them. They sometimes take place a day, a month, or over a 3-month period. But the planning process and the communications process and the branding process is really, is really continuous. And as we look at the programs, for the clients that we work with, whether you're surveying a previous year, whether you're researching your product, your marketing strategy for the following year, whether you're arranging for your relationships in the community, regardless, it's a constant process. And not only are we saying this because, yes, it takes a lot of time to plan, and yes, you need to be prepared, but the frequent touch points on different levels throughout the year helps to give the brand, the program, the volunteerism program, the brand that it needs, because you're not only experiencing it when you're out there volunteering, but you're experiencing it after the fact, you're experiencing it in anticipation of it. So it's something that you experience on different levels throughout the year, both actively and intellectually.
Yep. Principle 5, I think a brand should be evergreen to a certain extent, or to the extent possible. That is, you can create a brand for your employee volunteerism program, and it should endure over years. And many have endured for decades, such as the Disney one we showed earlier. But I think each year you have to come up with a new campaign if you're going to maximize engagement. The annual campaign needs to adapt and change to remain fresh and engaging. I think your employees really need, and they really deserve, a fresh new reason to get involved each year. So as if planning weren't enough of a challenge, now you've got to kind of reinvent the wheel to some extent each year. So just to review quickly the work we've done for Goldman Sachs Community Teamworks over the recent years, here's 2008. You can see, or you will see, that the kind of overarching brand and messaging remains the same, but the theme remains different. So here it's about international locations. Here it's really a direct play to kind of why you're doing it, because parks are vital to the community, because there's no greater gift than good health. And finally, the one that was most clearly based on research and what was the most successful for them, what do you want to be? The direct call to kind of step out of their usual comfort zone and try to allow them to be something else. So adapting it every year, and when you work with clients, as we do for a number of clients year after year, it can be a challenge to come up with something new to show and say about the volunteerism program, other than just new pictures of different activities. But it's really worth doing, because employees, I think, expect it and have a right to expect it. I think another principle, a key principle, is to develop shared goals. If you really want to maximize participation, is give employees a stake in the program's success. I think the idea of working together to achieve impact, when you're talking about corporate volunteerism, has to be baked somehow into the overall brand. And it's also in the messaging you deliver, and it's in the communications tools that you use. Give employees a stake in the success of your program so that they feel connected to something larger than just the activity that they're doing. GE does a really nice job at this. Here's some metrics from their website. So you can go into this nice interactive tool there on the left and pull up reports of volunteerism activity by geography. They have updates that you can download for, that you can register for, so that you're alerted. And this is available. What's interesting is this isn't on their intranet alone. It's also on their public site. So they're really, they're giving, not only are they giving their employees a stake in the success of this program, but they're broadcasting it to the wider universe of customers and clients. And they also do a nice job of reporting their success, the impact of their entire CSR program, which in their case includes some of their employee volunteerism efforts. General Mills is a VolunteerMatch client, and what I think, what it shows here is that it's not just data that shows participation. you can take a more qualitative approach to showing, how the success of a program. So if you look at this, their VolunteerMatch page, there's multiple profiles of volunteers. There's individual profiles as well as groups, and it's the sense that when you volunteer for General Mills, you're not just out there on your own. You're part of something larger. You have a stake in the overall success of this program, and therefore in the overall success of the company and of the community. And what's really, I understand, I don't have an example of this here, but Megan tells me that General Mills has actually taken its CSR and volunteerism reporting to an even higher level in terms of kind of reporting impact. They submitted a video along with Merck to the Boston College Center for Corporate Citizenship Film Festival, which talks about the efforts of these two organizations, Merck and General Mills, to educate young women in developing countries through this, what they call the Join My Village program in CARE. And so, it's sort of taking the impact reporting to a higher level. I think I'm looking forward to actually seeing that. It sounds very impressive. Exelon is another VolunteerMatch partner, and they use data again to show how increasing volunteer hours using the VolunteerMatch tool. Again, the more you get your employees involved in feeling that they have an impact beyond just the work in the community, but an impact in making the program itself a success. I think and the more you can create a brand around that, the more successful the program will be. So for Exelon, it's about letting employees in the world know how they're doing in terms of participation. So employees have a stake in that and feel a great sense of empowerment and contribution beyond the actual volunteering itself. And Goldman Sachs Impact Report, which we produced for a number of years now, it highlights participation by region and type of product. It's available online, both externally and internally. And you can go in and find ways to find out where they've done it and for whom, different types of organizations, different geographies. And our last principle is a key one as well. So you need to really deploy your brand as widely as possible in as many different kinds of media. A lot of organizations that we work for, where we don't work on the CSR and volunteerism programs, we see kind of the extent of the communications might be, someone tapes up a poster or even just a flyer in an elevator saying, join us so-and-so for, a Meals on Wheels campaign or something like that. And that's fine, and the spirit is right. But I think there are a lot of ways that you can really, once you've created a brand, deploy it in a much more broad-based manner to leverage the most impact possible through the broadest range of media. So here's Discovery Communications. Discovery is the parent of the Discovery Channels, and a whole host of networks, TLC, Animal Planet, and they've been actually with VolunteerMatch for a little over a year now. And they have this amazing, it's actually a portal that you can click onto from their homepage called Discovery Impact, which is just really a robust set of group of information about what they do, including volunteerism. And they launched this year this pro bono marathon, which they call Creating Change. And they did a really terrific job of launching it. And as you can see, the site is just fantastic. They've branded Discovery Impact. So they've created a brand that has their corporate brand and then the impact brand, the volunteerism or the CSR brand in this case, linked very closely to it. They have an annual volunteer day, as many of you do. They call Discover Your Impact. So again, a great linkage back to the corporate brand, but with its own sort of sub-brand having to do with volunteerism. And this is an example of an HTML email that they sent out to employees. Very, very nicely done. I talked before about CIBC World Markets, their Miracle Day. Again, the goal for this organization was to really let these tough, profit-driven traders understand that if they volunteer to reach out to their clients and non-clients, get them to trade with them, that they would actually be doing some good, to really connect them, to pull in their heartstrings and connect them to the end beneficiary, which in this case is children. So we created a film a number of years ago that's been used ever since. It's shown in kiosks at employee locations. It's shown it was actually shown at one point at Madison Square Garden during hockey games. It was used in the local news. And it looks like it started, so I'll just run a short bit of this to show. Again, the goal was to really connect investment bankers and traders with the beneficiaries.
The Winston School's ultimate mission is to realize the potential of all students, to instill confidence in them as people, certainly to reignite the idea of optimism.
Is there anybody who doesn't understand one of the questions?
All the teachers here have always made me feel more confident in myself and academics. Like whenever I need something, the teachers are always there to explain it to me. They'll spend like an entire free period like explaining everything to you.
So now can you read it?
Explode.
Explode, great. What does explode mean? I really like working with students who don't have school come automatically to them.
So, and as I said, we were happy to share the video with anyone who contacts us, but the point was, again, to connect people who really felt, after many years with this program, that, what are we doing this for? Who really benefits from that? To use the unique power of video, and particularly video now on the web, to connect them to the end beneficiaries is really important because they were feeling a disconnect. With Goldman Sachs, we created an animation, and it really talked about the goals of their CSR program, but in the end, it allowed them the opportunity to download the impact, because it's ultimately what they were trying to sell in a way with this was to get employees to download the impact report so they could get a sense of what the firm had achieved working together. So this was a relatively brief animation that was sent out, I believe was sent out by email to all employees, and then it was housed on their intranet, the employee intranet. And it used the photography from the prior year, as I talked about, where we're always sort of leapfrogging year to year to create the new visuals.
I think that's an important point to make. The assets that you create, whether it's photography or the video that we just shared with you, can be leveraged across many communications channels throughout the year for different purposes. The video we just showed a few moments ago was shown at Madison Square Garden. It was used as a distribution tool for video news releases to the news media and was picked up by many of the local news channels. This was used as an email on the intranet. It was broadcast in some of the, I believe in some of the elevators where there were digital screens, closer to the days of volunteerism or the period of volunteerism. So producing the assets and leveraging them throughout the year and throughout different venues makes a great, economy of scale for producing all of these things.
And what was interesting here also was that, again, we were trying to get employees ultimately to look at the impact, to download the impact summary, because we wanted them to feel that they had not only had they helped the community that day, but that they had participated in something that was a big success for Goldman Sachs and the concept of teamwork. And when you give them sort of an offer at the end, as you would with any online communication, you can actually gauge the number of hits that they get and the number of times it was downloaded. So it allowed the management at Goldman Sachs to see how many people were downloading this report. Was very important to them. Again, another gauge of how successful the program was. This is the most recent year's campaign. In a sense, we really branded their lobbies. This is, I think, London, New York, and New Jersey. And for, I guess, 3 to 5 months when the program runs, the community teamwork program runs, we created these giant posters in their lobbies and actually made these posters available. I don't know how many offices, 20, 30, 40 offices around the world, different custom sizes, everything from small easel boards to huge poster-sized objects here. And we really created a brand experience in the lobby so that everyone felt almost immersed in the community teamwork concept when they walked in.
And speaking to results again, one of the nice things here was, yes, it overall increased participation, but I think what really spoke to the impact and to the success was that there was even more of a dramatic increase in first day and second day, or first week, I should say, sign-ups for volunteerism. That number really spiked, and I think that speaks to the enthusiasm and the excitement that was building throughout the months prior through this campaign. And yes, there was an overall increase, but I think they've had a very good rate of acceptance prior. So we had an overall increase, but I think what we were most excited about was how enthusiastic people were and how quickly they signed up.
Yeah, and that absolutely. And when you when you do this, when you create a brand for your volunteerism efforts, and then you kind of create a brand experience for employees within that, you would hope to get 100% participation. No one does, but even people who don't participate get a sense of what the program is all about. It connects them to the goals of the program and therefore to the culture of the organization. So it's a victory even for those, even when you have employees who don't participate, because everyone understands more clearly what the company stands for and what they're looking for. So those are our 7 principles. As I said, I think it really begins, as any branding exercise does, with defining the brand, somehow aligning what the volunteerism program is with what the corporation does. We saw how Disney did that with the volunteers program and how Goldman did it more kind of abstractly with the notion of teamwork. And then the principles go all the way through to how do you deploy that at multiple touch points using as many different media channels as possible, from video to internet to animation to environmental branding in lobbies and at employees' desks. So, these principles in some ways apply to creating a brand for almost, even for a product. But I think what's interesting here is how they apply also to creating a strong brand for employee volunteerism programs. So that's our presentation, and we'd love to address questions or hear some comments.
Thank you, Seth and Howard. Yes, we have a few questions. So to the audience members, if more questions come up as you're listening, send them to us and we'll share them with the audience. The first one was a question about suggestions you might have for determining what motivates employees to participate. I think it's regarding the second principle. Maybe we can go back a slide so we can all look at the 7 principles again. So what would you suggest clients do or companies do to determine what motivates their employees to participate?
I think there are a variety of things we spoke about today that speak to that. First, we recommend surveying employees. It's best to cast the widest net, so we recommend online surveys are very valuable tools in gleaning that kind of information, both prior to programs as well as surveying employees after a program. You learn a lot about what motivates people, what they thought motivated them versus what may have actually motivated them once they got involved. Sometimes it's what motivates them to get involved again. That's a different motivation than what motivated them initially. So the surveying of the employee base and of the volunteers before and after can be very valuable. We've also had success with some qualitative focus groups done casually throughout the company, again, throughout different employee levels, both at the executive level and at the line level. And we've also seen, some intercept work. There have been kiosks set up in companies where there are people to ask questions and answer questions. So you can be as high touch or as high tech as you want, and typically it's a combination of the two that work best.
And what's also valuable, and this is true of any brand research, is to find out why people didn't volunteer. So, surveying last year's participants as to why they got involved and what was most satisfying is really important. But as Howard said, if you cast a wider net and survey all employees, you'll find out why employees didn't volunteer. And it could be anything from, on a very practical level, they didn't have time, to, anxiety about what they were going to do, or feeling that they didn't have anything to offer, or they weren't interested in the particular activities that were made available to them. So you don't know until you do it. So, but surveying, it's just like surveying for a consumer product, non-users or users of your competitor product. It's just as important sometimes as surveying the people who have gotten involved.
Great, thank you. Another question that came in terms of giving staff new reasons to volunteer, were you talking about the program in a fresh new way, or changing the activities and focus of the program?
Well, it should be both, but we're here to talk about a brand and communication. So how how the program evolves over time is really the expertise of all of you and not of us. My sense is that the more you adapt and fine-tune your offering over time, the more successful you'll be, particularly if you have done research to find out what was most successful and what wasn't. But we're talking here about branding and communications, which is essentially taking what you're doing and finding a way to communicate its value most effectively. So we're talking, about essentially the product is the same, but keeping the communications fresh to give people, a new reasons to get involved. But yeah, I would imagine that the more you can actually refresh the underlying program, the better. But that's sort of beyond our area of expertise, although we're happy to offer our opinions, as we always are.
Thank you.
And we have another question. For companies that are larger and have multiple operating companies or global locations, how do you recommend creating a brand that's going to be unified while still allowing for flexibility at each one of those locations or operating companies to fit those motivations for those specific employees?
Right, that's a great question. To some extent, it goes back to the first principle, which is what is the corporate brand? I mean, if the operating companies are connected by a strong corporate brand or master brand, then I would imagine you would want your CSR and employee volunteerism activities to be similarly connected. But if you have a sort of house of brands idea, like Procter & Gamble does, or a lot of the pharmaceutical companies do, then you might be better off having separate volunteerism brands. It kind of depends on the organization. Now with Goldman Sachs, they have one central corporate brand. There are no real externally facing sub-brands. So there it was a question of creating a brand and unifying it globally, and then creating the tools that are adaptable locally. And for them, it involves a lot of sensitivity to different language issues. Our inclination was frequently to use sort of plays on words and puns that didn't work globally. Images had to be very sensitive. One of the challenges with that organization was that they didn't want, we sent photographers around the world, to India and China and Japan and across the U.S. and Europe, South America, to shoot activities, but we didn't want, their Tokyo office to only have posters showing Tokyo activities, although there might be a preponderance of that, because the goal for Goldman Sachs was to create sort of this one world, one firm idea through the volunteerism. So the program encouraged and facilitated the sharing, using photographs from different locations around the world in different locations. So it had a sort of more universal appeal. But in terms of whether you create one volunteerism brand or multiple, ultimately I think that I would say ideally you would create one because it's more scalable and it unites the company, but it really has to do with the brand strategy of the corporation overall, I would say.
Great, thank you. Another one of our questions, this says, in a corporate culture where volunteerism is not yet promoted and buy-in is not yet present from all the corporate leadership, what scale of planning or rollout would you suggest for a company that's under 200 employees? Should we go all out or start with fewer opportunities and ramp up while we get our feet wet?
I certainly think I would never recommend going all out, especially on a first-time initiative. I think in a situation like that, it's best to build momentum. So start small, build a strong program, get everyone involved. I think when executive buy-in comes, when they see the motivation of employees, when they see the level of participation, clearly you can share data and information about what other companies are doing that are similar size and larger, and gather that information to garner executive buy-in. But people, I think, are most convinced when they see their own employees appreciating the initiative, getting involved in the initiative, and they start to see a sense of culture building. Some of the surveying, which is very inexpensive to do, surveying prior and surveying following, will give you a lot of data and anecdotal information in order to, I think, encourage executive buy-in over time and to build the program.
Yeah, and really the question is two parts. One is how extensively to jump into the whole corporate volunteerism program, and then the other is the branding and communicating of it, which is really what we're talking about. I will say that, and again, this goes back to the first principle, to get sort of senior management buy-in. I think the more you can show that you're creating a program that supports the corporate brand in some way, the more you'll get buy-in. I mean, appeal to the pocketbook rather than the heart in this case might be a better way to start, and look to Disney or Campbell's as models and say, how can we create a volunteerism program that somehow supports directly or indirectly our corporate brand and the corporate communications efforts. And if you do that, I think it'll be an easier sell to senior management.
Wonderful, thank you. So we have a few more questions. One of them is asking, how would you suggest engaging employees who work in more of a manufacturing setting? So they're working kind of on shift and might be interested, to get engaged with their volunteer program. Do you have ideas of how to engage kind of remote employees or people who are kind of working more on the floor?
Well, I think many of the same principles are involved. So what we're saying, I think what the question is sort of saying is people don't have access to computers throughout their job, and I think a lot of the environmental branding things we talked about work very nicely there. There are common areas where those employees congregate, whether it's lunch areas or other common areas within the building, as well as within the manufacturing environment. I think the other challenge, of course, is figuring out a program where people can find the time or be given the opportunity to take the time to volunteer. So whether it's that you're giving those employees the time off, or whether or not it's a voluntary contribution during off hours. Sometimes in the manufacturing environment, it's more challenging for people to find the free time to participate and to get to location. But I think I'm going a little bit off point there because that's a little bit more tactical in terms of understanding your employee base and understanding the limits operationally. From a branding perspective, I think we have found whenever dealing with trying to communicate, whether it's a corporate brand or a volunteerism brand, to people in manufacturing environments, environmental branding is really been the most successful media and channel.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny when you asked that question, I was thinking that with the CIBC World Markets, our audience there was pretty much men and women, mostly men in this case, who sat on the trading floor, which has certain similarities to a manufacturing environment in that it's big, it's crowded, it's noisy. There's not a lot of you're not keeping your eye on the lathe or the drill press, but you're keeping your eye on the your Bloomberg terminal. So as Howard said, in those cases, branding the entire environment with posters and video kiosks and stuff is really key, so that when people step away from their desk or their machine, if only for a minute or two, they get some sort of messaging about what the volunteerism program is about.
Thank you again. So I have a few more questions. One short one was, have you seen companies that integrate volunteerism into their performance reviews in a positive way?
We have. It's not our area of expertise in terms of, human resources and compensation and benefits, but we know from the work that we've done that a number of organizations do that. I don't know how it's done exactly, but I've seen where it's part of your permanent record and you log in, you report into human resources the hours you spent volunteering and that kind of thing. But we're not really experts on kind of structuring those programs. But I certainly have seen it done. A couple of the clients that we talked about here, I know, are doing it.
Okay, great. Well, as we get close to the hour, any questions that we haven't addressed yet, I can definitely send to the speakers afterwards. But I wanted to give Howard and Seth, first of all, a thank you. That was very useful, and I think we have a lot of great examples to work with. I wanted to give you a chance to leave with any final thoughts before I wrap things up.
Well, thank you. Again, thanks to everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate your participation and your good, thoughtful questions. And we will certainly follow up with a copy of our white paper that gives outlines what we've spoken about today and provides even greater detail. I think, the takeaways for today are, really get to know what drives your employees. This employee volunteerism programs are about getting your employees involved, and you need to know what's going to motivate them to get involved. And we want to not only get everyone involved in doing good, but where possible, we want to cast a positive halo on the corporation as well. So align your activities, align with the interests of employees, and if you're doing both of those, I think at the end of the day, you'll be benefiting both the employees, the culture of the organization, and the overall brand of the corporation.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you so much. So as Howard and Seth said, we'll be sending their white paper out after, and this is recorded for any of you that had to leave or your colleagues weren't able to make it. And just as a reminder to those of you on the call, definitely check in at the VolunteerMatch corporate blog, volunteeringiscsr.org. We'll be posting more useful information as well as news about upcoming webinars. You can also sign up for our newsletter, solutions@volunteermatch.org, to receive more information on a monthly basis. Our next webinar is the end of fundraising, market your results and sell your impact, with Jason Stahl, founder and CEO of Mission Measurement. That will be on Thursday, April 7th, same time as all of our webinars. And thank you again to Howard and Seth, and we look forward to seeing everyone again.
Thank you.
Thank you.